You're listening to Fishing the DMV with your host, Thomas Ahrens. Fishing the DMV is brought to you by Jake's Bait and Tackle, located in Winchester, Virginia.
If that doesn't get you jacked up, I don't know what will.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Fishing the DMV. I'm your host, Thomas Ahrens. Today, I have a real special treat. I have on Michael Eckert. We've been talking for a while now about trying to get you on the show to talk about some really interesting topics about weather, about Lake Anna, about how weather affects fishing. Sir, thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Thomas. I appreciate you inviting me on to talk today.
Yeah, as always I do with guests when it's their first time on the show. What got you into fishing?
Actually, my first memory was when I was 4 years old. My grandfather gave me one of those fiberglass green bait casting rods. It was probably about 4 feet long, and caught some trout up in Maine. And I was hooked from there. I just fished for everything. I moved all over. My dad was in the Air Force, so we moved from Maine to New York. Hawaii is where I really got into fishing because there was a lot of shark fishing there in Hawaii. I used to fish right in Pearl Harbor. We were stationed at Hickam.
Oh, dude, that's cool.
We would fish. Yeah, we would. This is back in the late 60s, early 70s. And my dad would let me leave the house at 1 a.m. on my bicycle with all my rods and reels and everything, drive out to Pearl Harbor on one of the piers and sit there and fish all night with some of my buddies. I mean, I'm only 10, 11 years old. And then, we'd catch sharks and stingrays and stuff like that and do it every weekend. It was a blast.
So I just got to ask with that, what's the coolest thing that you caught in Hawaii?
It's probably the hammerhead sharks. We would catch tons of hammerhead sharks. We caught spotted rays, manta rays, regular stingrays. But in the 4 years that we lived there and the diving that my dad and I did, we never saw one shark in 4 years in diving. Not one. We saw everything else, but we never saw sharks. But they were there, but we never saw one. But I think it was the hammerhead sharks. And they would, most of them were like, 3 to 5 feet. Occasionally you get a 6-footer in or something like that.
When you mean diving, do you mean spearfishing or with scuba
We were
gear?
snorkeling. We were snorkeling and we were spearfishing. Yep. We'd get, octopus. We'd spearfish for other fish and cook them up and stuff like that. But we never saw any sharks while we were diving in Hawaii for the time we were there. And then we left there in 73 and got stationed to Tinker Air Force Base in the Oklahoma City area. And that's where I fell in love with weather. We couldn't get on base, so we had to take a temporary home in a mobile home, which is typical for Oklahoma. And it was like 2 or 3 days later, and we had a thunderstorm, and it produced baseball-size hail. And if you've ever experienced baseball-size hail inside of a aluminum mobile home, it's something else. Well, I was fascinated by it. The next day, I was in the library grabbing all the books on weather and just fell in love with it and went to the University of Oklahoma, got my degree in meteorology, late 70s to the early 80s. And then from there, my first job out, I was with a small weather company in Oklahoma City. And first day, the boss came in and says, "Hey, we want you to do TV." I've never been on TV. And as you can see, I have a face for radio. And
Say that.
so it's your first job. What are you going to do? Say no? So I got 30 minutes of training. I was on TV in Oklahoma City for 2 years, did radio in Oklahoma City for a couple of years. And then I realized the media is a rat race. It is really a tough business because it's all about ratings. It's all about ratings. It really doesn't, you can have a great forecast, but if the people don't like you and your ratings aren't good, they're not going to sign another contract and not going to continue. So after a couple of years, I got into the Weather Service, went to Toledo, Ohio for a couple of years. And then I went to Cleveland, Ohio for about 5 years. And that's where I started getting into preparedness activities. I was a warning preparedness meteorologist there. So worked a lot with the state and local governments on informing people, educating people on severe weather and hazards and flash floods and tornadoes and things like that. And then back in the early 90s, I got an opportunity to come to D.C. And it was partly because my wife said she was tired of moving the family around and the girls. So I said, well, let's go to DC because I can move up in the Weather Service, but I don't have to move the family around. So moved to DC, moved to Warrenton, and lived there for 30 years. And the first job was at the Weather Prediction Center. And that's where I really got a real good education on heavy convective rainfall and flash flooding. I was one of the kind of the national experts on that. And I was actually an instructor in Boulder, Colorado at a training center. So I did a lot of instructing out there, a lot of visiting across the country, talking about heavy rain and flash flooding. And then after commuting 128 miles a day for 20 years, I went through 3 cars. Yeah.
Ew.
I got a job with the FAA in Warrenton, which cut my commute to like 30 miles. So
that's like a drop in the. That's like working remote, man.
it was like going direct to retirement almost when I was doing that. Yeah, I put 775,000 miles on 3 cars in 20 years. But then got that job in Warrenton. I did that for 10 years, and that was basically weather advising for the FAA. They have a big command center there, which controls all the airspace for the whole United States. Most people don't even know it's right there in the backyard. It's a pretty big federal complex. It's at the old Vint Hill building, or Vint Hill Army Base. And it's right next to Lake Brittle, which I've fished that lake a ton of times. I don't know if you've ever been out to Lake Brittle.
We used to. I'm going to date myself a little bit. There was a time when there were no houses around Lake Brittle, and we would go catfishing there with my aunt. And that place has a lot of memories of just catfishing, and didn't do as much bass fishing because at the time I was really little and wasn't completely addicted to that side of fishing. But I haven't been back. I hear like there's tons of lily pads. There's still fish in there, but I haven't been back in the last probably 10 years.
Yeah, I've seen some good bass out of there, some 6 and 8 pounders come out. I was out there one day fishing, and John Odenkirk was out there, and they were doing sampling. And I pulled up next to him, and I said, well, what'd you get today? And he showed me these absolutely humongous. He had like 2 or 3 bass that were like 7, 8 pounds.
Wow.
So there's some big bass. And this was probably 15 or 20 years ago, but I don't know how it is now because there's so much housing built up around it. It's pretty crowded. And the nightlife there is probably not the best. There's a lot of crap that goes on there at night. But so I worked in the Warrenton, the FAA there for 10 years, and then hit 62 years old, and it was time to retire. We'd have been looking at Lake Anna, and found a lot down here, and built a house down here in 2022. Been down here for a little over 3 years, and just learning Lake Anna. It's a finicky lake. I tell you can go out one day and everything's great, and you go out the next day and everything changes. The fishing changes, whether it could be the weather or just, you don't know, different parts of the lake. It just fishes the lower part, the middle part, the upper part. It fishes very much differently, and depending on the day of the week or time of year.
How do you, and so for people that don't know, and myself included, how do you generally fish? Are you on the bank, kayak, boat?
So I've got a aluminum Ranger, 18.5-foot aluminum Ranger, RT 188. So that was actually my first boat. Before that, I had a John boat. I had a souped up John boat. I built a deck on it and everything else for like 25 years. I was fishing out of my John boat. So I was fishing all these small lakes in Northern Virginia on my John boat, and fishing some of the local tournaments. And local groups and stuff like that. So I fished most of the small lakes all the way from, Gordonsville up to Lake Orange. I've been up to Lake Frederick probably 50 times and beat my head against that one. That is a tough lake. It's so clear. Oh my gosh, it's so clear.
That is one of the few places where you can say, I think personally can say unequivocally, live scope helps a lot. Like that's a place, the way this fish set up for some reason, when scope came around, people realized like, oh, there's 22-pound bags floating around there. But you really couldn't catch them unless it was like for a couple of weeks at different times of year when they were easy to catch. Besides that, they just ghosted. They just disappeared into the ether.
Yeah. And it's so deep also. There's that one spot just outside the dam. It's like 45, 50 feet deep. There's those shelves, and both channels are real deep and everything. But Yeah, I was a John boat fisherman for years, and then finally, when I knew I was going to get ready to retire, I talked my wife into letting me buy a big boy boat. So I've got that boat. So the nice thing is it's down on the water, it's sitting under a covered boat slip, so I can 5 minutes I walk down, hook everything up, and I'm on my way. And 15 minutes I'm on the water already, and figuring out which way I'm going to go, left, right, up, or down.
Without giving away your home address, are you on the public side or the private side, also called the warm water side?
No, I'm on the public side. I live above. I'm above Rose Valley,
Okay.
so up more in the river section, and I tend to fish more above the splits. Well, I'd say above 208. I tend to fish more above 208, probably because I live up in that area a little bit more. So I've fished that a lot more. And I've been marking brush piles and rock piles for 3 years. I probably got, I don't know, 70 or 80 already marked, but I fish that a lot. Probably, I would say 20% of my fishing is below 208, and probably 90% of that is Sturgeon Creek and Contrary Creek. And below that, I just don't get down there and fish that often. It's a little bit of a longer run, and it's so big and wide open. I just haven't had the time to go down there and spend the time learning that as much. I've been focused more in the mid to up lake sections.
What are with your degree and what you've been doing for so long? This is a really cool opportunity, because I have so many questions too about the weather and stuff, because you have the old wives' tales versus the reality of it. And I would love for you, like, what are some myths that people believe about fishing and weather that aren't actually true?
Well, the one thing that sticks out is people talk about prefrontal versus postfrontal, and they talk about the pressure changes in the atmosphere and the lateral lines on fish. And the pressure changes don't occur very quickly. They're actually very gradual and very slow. And I'm personally not convinced that the changes in pressure affect the fish, and especially because water is pretty much an incompressible fluid. I know a lot of people talk about it and say it's prefrontal. Now, the other day I was out before the front came in, and I caught, I don't know, 12 or 13 bass. It was a really good morning, but they were all deep. Everything was deep. It was down to 12, 15, 20 feet. And I couldn't get anything unless I was throwing a Carolina rig lizard on them. That was the only thing. It was on the old ball and chain. I think the lateral line is more for, quick vibrations and fish moving in water and jumping around in water and things like that. I think that's probably more that lateral line where they can sense a difference in pressure. But I'm just kind of convinced the pressure moves enough. It doesn't. Pressures don't fall and rise real fast where it can compress water. I mean, you just can't compress water. It's basically almost a solid. So I think that would be the one big thing. But I've had good days post frontal too. The winds are blowing. It's cold, the water's getting mixed up and everything else. High pressure's coming in, and I've had good days on those too. So I'm just not convinced that prefrontal is better than postfrontal, because I've had both good and bad days on both of those. That's probably one really big one. Go ahead.
If you are 50-50 on how pressure affects the fish, which I could be wrong, but I think that's what you were saying. What do you think makes them change then when you have different fronts come through, if it's not the pressure?
I think it's probably more the wind. And because when you get a front through, you're going to change the wind direction. So if you got winds out of the south ahead of a front, which they usually are south or southeast, then the smaller fish, the bait fish and stuff like that, if the winds are strong enough, are going to be piling up, on your north shores or your west shores or something like that. Whereas with a north wind, the bait and stuff is going to get pushed around and probably piling up more on the south shores and stuff like that. So I know that old rule, fish with the wind to your back, is actually probably a pretty good rule. That way, you're casting with the wind to your back, and the bait fish and stuff is being pushed up into, coves or into points and things like that. Another thing is with precipitation. So we've had a situation here on Lake Anna for the last, in most of the middle Atlantic where we're all in drought right now. So we had a terribly wet June and July. We had a ton of rain, ton of inflow. The lake levels were staying high. There was a lot of muddy water. But then all of a sudden, Mother Nature turned off the spigot. We've been pretty dry for August, September, and going into October. And the lake level now on the private side is down 13 inches from full pool.
Wow.
So that's quite a bit of water that's been either let out or evaporated from the lake. And it's basically become a little bit stagnant. There's no fresh water running into the lake. And because there's no fresh water, I think the oxygen levels in the water have actually dropped off in certain areas. And these fish need oxygen, especially this time of year when the waters are cooling off. They know they're going to start eating. But if there's not the oxygen, do they have the energy levels to really, get moving around and find it? Now, largemouth bass are probably not as susceptible to lower oxygen as like the stripers are, because the stripers are always moving around. I mean, you watch them on your scope, and I don't have live scope, but I've seen them on other people's. And those schools just move around, and they're 20 feet in front of you, and then 2 seconds later, the school's gone, and they've moved off. And the striper season's been pretty poor. It's just been horrible. They just have not been catching them like we did last summer into the fall season. So we really need some big rains, because that'll pump in a lot of fresh water. It'll pump in a lot of oxygenated water. And also there's a lot of stuff that went with the runoff, worms and bugs and grubs, things like that'll get washed into the water. It'll get more food for the fish. So I think the precipitation, when we're getting rain, I think that's really good. And I've had some really good days out there fishing in the rain. I usually don't go when it's heavy, but I'll be out there when it's light rain. It'll probably be raining tomorrow, and I should be out there in the morning.
Would this year be considered El Nino or El Nina? Because I don't know too much about that.
It's La Nina this year, which is actually more favorable for drought. But last winter we had an El Nino, and which usually favors some bigger storms on the East Coast, but it did favor higher precip amounts. And we had that through the spring, May, June, and July, where it seemed like we were getting thunderstorms every other day, if not day after day after day. And then, go ahead.
No, finish your thought first.
And then we've switched over to La Nina, and it's all based on the temperature of the equatorial Pacific Ocean. And what it does, it adjusts the jet stream. And when we're in La Nina, the jet stream kind of gets shoved up north of us. And if you're well south of the jet stream, you just don't get a lot of precipitation. So the jet stream's just been to our north for so long. And it's been keeping all the tropical systems out of here, too. We really haven't had much in the way of tropical weather. Everything's been what we call in the industry a fish storm, where it's just out over open water and really doesn't bother anybody. So, but it's actually supposed to pretty much stay La Nina and maybe weaken a little bit into the winter, which again is not real good for big East Coast storms. But we can get those even in El Nino or La Nina pattern. We can get these big East Coast snowstorms that a lot of people fantasize about, but we only get those about once every 4 or 5 years. Now, of course, where you're at, up near Hagerstown, since you're higher elevation, further away from the warmer waters of the Atlantic, you get a ton more snow than like in DC and Northern Virginia and stuff like that. But down here in Lake Anna, we average about 11 inches of snow a year. The average snowstorm is like 1 to 2 inches. I mean, we just don't get a lot of snow down. The last big one was in January of 2022. It was localized, but there was about 12 to 14 inches of a snow band. It went right through the Lake Anna area. It's pretty devastating, knocked down millions of trees, and people were out of power for about a week or so. But if you're up in DC, you never knew about it. It just there wasn't much up there in that area.
How do these major storms, let's say if we did have a hurricane that was going to be approaching, deer, different things that are above the water, they somehow know that it's coming. They know to hunker down. They know to get ready for it. If it's not the barometric pressure that's affecting their lateral lines, could it be their swim bladder? Is it just the bait fish, or is it just, like you said, just the wind that tells them something's approaching?
It could be a combination. I mean, I don't have any background in biology or anything, but the thing with the pressure, because it does change fairly steadily and slowly, I'm not sure how that affects the lateral line. I mean, John Odenkirk would probably know more about that than most of us. That would be a good question for him. But the swim bladder, maybe I just don't. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how that affects them. I thought, isn't the swim bladder just when they get to a certain spot where they want to stay, and then their body equalizes it to keep them right in that one level, I guess.
Yeah. So example is if you pulled them out of really deep water, St. Lawrence River, things like that, and you pull them up too fast, which is the same thing with ocean fish too. They didn't have a chance to equalize the pressure in the bladder, and then they can't swim. How much heat, this is such a weird way to say this, but what warms up the fastest? Is it wood? Is it rock? Is it the color of the surface? What actually is the biggest indicator for like this side of the lake will heat up better, or this area?
I think it's the darker water heats up better, just the darkness. Because let's take your yard and you have asphalt next to grass. You take any sunny afternoon, bare feet, you step on the grass, it's warm, but it's not, and you step on your black asphalt, and it's going to be, 20 degrees warmer. I think it's the darkness and it's the muddy water. And I've seen that here in the spring a lot, where the upper parts of the lake, even though they get colder than the lower parts, because the lower part is getting that infusion of warmed water from the nuclear power plant, and it stays, maybe upper 40s, around 50 degrees, depending on how much the plant is running. But that pool down by Dike 3 can stay pretty warm all winter long. Meanwhile, the upper part gets into the 30s, or last year we froze over. We had about 2.5 to 3 weeks where we couldn't do anything. I had probably 4 inches of ice in my cove. And there was a massive shad kill after that cold outbreak last year. I mean, it was massive. There were dead shad everywhere. And I think that might play in a little bit to the fishing this spring and summer might not have been as good, because maybe the shad die-off, there weren't as many shad left from the cold water. But we had ice from Rose Valley in the splits all the way up to the upper part. And there were people in the upper parts up above Tim's and stuff like that they couldn't get out for 4 weeks. They had probably 5 or 6 inches of ice in the water up there. But definitely the muddy water heats up quicker because it absorbs the radiation better and then readmits it. So when the radiation's coming in from the sun, it's shortwave radiation. That's what burns your skin, gives you a sunburn. But then it gets absorbed by the water in boathouses and things like that. And then they absorb it, and then it readmits it as long wave radiation, which is actually the heat. And that's when it starts heating up the water. But the darker colors definitely are better for heating the water up quicker. Because I've seen, they're in the 30s in February, and then all of a sudden mid-March, and there's 50-degree water, way up north, and it still hasn't really changed much down by Dike 3. It's pretty much the same down there, but that water is very clear.
So then let's just say you have a Lake X that's gin clear 24/7. What is the next factor variable underneath the water clarity that would promote heating?
Well, structure, as long as it's not too deep. I'm not sure how preventative the depth of the water is for that shortwave radiation to get down and start heating up and getting absorbed into, brush piles, into rock piles and things like that. Rock piles, you think, would be probably really good absorber, because most of your rock piles are going to be, mossy, dark green or black or something like that. So it's the closer you are to black, the better absorption you're going to have, and the better readmittance of that irradiation as heat to warm up.
So it'd be rock, wood, and then I guess grass would be the third.
Yeah, but there's really not much grass. I mean, there's some dead grass, but there's really not much grass in the spring until it starts growing. There's just not much there. In fact, a lot of the grass is dying off now. The grass out by our boat docks and everything is pretty much just sticks. There's just not much left. There's no leaves left on it or anything, and I'm not sure why it died off so quick.
Well, did that have to do with allegedly, again, Facebook rumors that they did a ton of spraying the past couple of weeks at Lake Anna?
Yeah, they've done some spraying in some areas for the hydrilla. So I like the hydrilla because I fish.
Mm-hmm.
Other people don't like the hydrilla because it gets in the way of their boating activities and stuff like that. It's kind of a 50-50 issue down here. So, but they have sprayed some areas. I think the last one was, I think they sprayed, I don't know how many acres in the back of Plentiful Creek. And I've been back there fishing several times, and I really haven't caught much back there anyway. So it's pretty shallow, muddy. There's a little bit of a channel back there, but I mean, it's really shallow. You get back to where some of the boathouses are in the back there, it's only 2 or 3 feet deep.
Wow.
So if they want to spray back there, I mean, that's fine. But Plentiful's I've been doing really good there out in the main part of Plentiful where it's like, 15 to 20 feet deep. I've been catching a lot of bass, but it's all been up to last week when the waters were still in the 70s, low to mid 70s. I've still been catching up deep. I have not seen a lot of fish pushing back into the back of the creeks and chasing the shad yet, at least me personally. I know that Matt Strukel? He mentioned that on his last show with you that he saw some in some of the back of the creeks, but it seemed like they were still kind of deep. They weren't pushed all the way back in yet.
Yeah, and the other thing was again, guys, go check out that episode with SP Fishing. The places he was targeting also had a ton of vegetation in them, and that's a interesting variable because the Bassmaster classic pattern of shad in the back of coves, I don't know if that holds up if the primary structure becomes vegetation, because when it becomes green grass, I feel like bass will just always be drawn to that, because if you guys don't know, grass is a living organism until you spray it. So it's a living, breathing thing that really attracts bluegill, phytoplankton, the whole animal kingdom to it. So if you have a creek that has none and a creek that does, I think in my brain, there will always be there regardless of temperature until it starts dying off and they got to leave.
Right.
I don't know. It's interesting with grass, how this place will evolve.
Yeah, and there is a ton of grass there. If you go way back in Freshwater Creek and the Concrete Creek, there's a ton of lily pads back in there and stuff like that. So the lily pads they'll be there, all winter long. They're not growing, but they're still there. So, and they too, I mean, since they're, the leaves are pretty much sitting right on the top of the water, they're absorbing the radiation and they're re-emitting it. So those pockets, potentially could be a degree or two warmer, once the water really starts to cool off. So it still could hold some bass back in there, some places like that.
What do you think is more important? Is it the drop in temperature? And this is just generically speaking to any body of water, just fishing in general in the fall. Is it the drop in temperature or is it the reduction of daylight? How important or how unimportant is the days getting shorter?
That's a great question.
And it could be anecdotally.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but I'm not sure if the bass can register the slow change in daylight, losing a minute a day or something like that. Whereas the other day I was out there and most of the water I was seeing around was 73 to 74 degrees. And I'm going to guarantee you when I go out tomorrow morning, I'm probably going to see the water down in the mid to upper 60s. So that's a pretty good drop over 3 or 4 days. And I think the temperature, they can register that. I think that probably makes a bigger impact on them versus the very slow change in daylight. Because we only lose, this time of year, we're losing about a minute a day. And that's about it. So I'm not sure if that registers for them.
And I wonder if it registers for them, but their reaction is secondary to like the leaves on trees change. And if it doesn't freeze, the days getting shorter affects photosynthesis. It affects the trees. They understand what's coming. And so This is also probably a biology question. As the days get shorter, does that do something in the food chain to where it starts signaling through everything that fall is coming? Because in Georgia, in parts of South Carolina where you don't get deep freezes usually, what signals to them fall's coming? I mean, is there a huge temperature drop in Georgia and South Carolina, or is it something else that tells them, hey, listen, that we have a seasonal change that's starting to approach? It's interesting.
Yeah, well, don't forget their water temperatures, they're easily in the 90s through much of the summer.
True.
So you go from, temperatures well into the 90s, and then even in the middle of winter, their water temperatures are probably, even down in Georgia and Florida, they're probably getting to the upper 60s to lower 70s, maybe even colder than that. So, you're looking at a, 25 or 30 degree drop in temperature, and that first cold front probably turns things over quite a bit. So,
how much of a temperature change do you think it jolts a fish?
I would say anything over 5 degrees, I think that would be a shock to the system. And I would just think of it as you as a person stepping outside. And if the temperature dropped 5 degrees, you're not going to notice a 1 or 2 or 3 degree temperature. But I think anything over 5 degrees, you're going to notice that when you step outside. And I think it would be 5 degrees. And then once you see that, I think you're going to see a change. And I think you're going to see that change happening pretty quick now, because we were from the mid 70s. I think we're going to be in at least the upper 60s, maybe even chillier when I get out there tomorrow morning, especially with this wind. That's the other thing, is we've had this steady wind from the north of about 15 to 25 miles per hour and gusty. So I've been seeing whitecaps out there in Rose Valley. I took a ride and just rode around, and it was just blowing and whitecaps. And when that water's turning over like that, it creates these eddies, and the warmer water gets scooped down underneath, and it starts bringing the cooler water up and recirculating and mixing it up and everything else. And I think you can get more rapid drops in temperatures by when that water starts mixing like that quite a bit.
When the wind changes direction, how long do you think it takes for the bait to be affected? So classic Bassmaster Magazine example, wind-blown pockets, the bait gets blown into it. So it's coming out of the north for a week.
Right.
And then the next day it changes to another wind direction. Just pick one. How long until you give up on those northern wind-blown pockets?
That's a good question. I'm not sure about that. But the one thing that does concern me, so if you've had several days of the wind blowing in the same direction right now, so you should have the bait piled up in the downwind sections. So if that wind switches dramatically and goes the other direction, the other question asked is, does that bait somehow get dispersed a little bit, or do they really hang in together? So there could be a transition period where they kind of get dispersed a little bit, especially if it's a pretty good change in wind direction and you still got pretty good speeds. But if it's maybe just a slight change in wind direction, it might not make any difference on how they are. They might just still hang in that same area as long as the winds aren't blowing too strong. Like this week, the winds look like we're still going to be gusty tomorrow and the next day, a little bit breezy out of the north, but then it dies off on Thursday and switches around back to a south direction on Friday ahead of another system. But it doesn't look like it's going to be blowing from the south at 20 to 25 miles an hour. So I would think there'd be probably quite a bit of bait piled up on the south shores from the steady 3 or 4 days of north winds. And hopefully the bass are waiting there tomorrow morning.
How long does it take a front to go through and rotate to the, I guess you go from let's say you got a cold front coming in. How long does it take usually for that thing to roll through? What is it dependent on?
It depends on the size of the high pressure behind it, because what it is, everyone looks at a weather map and they see this blue line with the triangles on it, and they think, oh, there's the cold front. But all it is behind the cold front, the air pressure is higher, so the air is more dense. Ahead of it, the air is warmer and less dense. So if you have a dense pocket of any kind of fluid, and air is a fluid, and you have that impinging on a less dense pocket of fluid, the dense pocket of fluid is going to win out. Now, if the differences between them are not that great, the front is going to move slow. Okay. I've seen fronts in the summertime take several hours to get across Lake Anna. Whereas last week when the front came through, I was in the upper part of the lake and it hit, and within 20 minutes it had cleared the dam. So it just blew through. And that was the beginning of the this cold period that we've had here for the last 4 or 5 days. So that was a pretty big cold front that actually came through.
All right, guys, just for all of my YouTube listeners that'll be watching this bad boy, here's just a really badly generic map, but at least you guys can get a visual idea here. So blue's the cold front, it's pushing in, and then red is going to be a warm front, right? Okay.
Right. And the warm fronts usually push to the north or northeast, and the cold fronts come down and they push down from the west or the northwest. And you've got low pressure right in the middle. So the airflow around the low is counterclockwise. So if we're in Virginia right now, we have southerly flow. We're in the warm sector of this cyclone, and you're going to have a lot of precipitation up on the warm front and around the low, and then on the cold front, you'll probably have showers and some thunderstorms along the cold front. Yep.
How does this affect air density? Because there are certain times, let's say you go out wintertime fishing, and I've had days like this where it's so quiet, insanely quiet, and it just feels like you're in a vacuum. It's insane. You get out there and you can have great days doing that. And I've always been curious, what creates that effect? Is that like a front that passed through, a front that's basically sat down on top of me?
So when you mean when you go out and you're just no winds or anything?
No winds, no nothing, and it just feels like, it almost sounds like everything's muffled, if that makes any sense. Out in the wintertime.
But when that happens, when there's no wind, so these lines are isobars, and the closer the isobars are together, the stronger the winds are blowing. Okay.
Okay.
So when we have areas of high pressure sitting over us, or we have very widespread out isobars, which we're showing here in the western U.S. and the Rockies, you're going to have light winds. That's when you're going to have your lightest winds are when you got high pressure sitting right over the top of you. So like Thursday morning, Friday morning, high pressure looks like it'll be sitting pretty much right on the top of us. Probably there's going to be some frost away from the warmer cities and stuff. So I don't know if you've had a frost up there, but you're probably going to have at least a frost or maybe a light freeze up your way. But Thursday or Friday morning with that high pressure, it sits right over us. So yeah, when the isobars or the lines of pressure are very spread apart, that's when you have light winds and you're not going to have anything going on. No wind at all. And those are great days. I mean, those are great days to fish for the fishermen. Some days it's great on catching fish, but I've had other days where, they say the bluebird skies, and light winds, and it's hard to fish like that. I think that has some truth to it, just because fish are predators and they also know their prey at some point, at least most of them. And when you've got high sunshine, clear skies, that sunlight is penetrating down through the water, they're going deep, they're hiding down, and they're kind of hunkering down and waiting for, darker skies or cloudy skies or things like that.
That's cool stuff. Awesome stuff. How do you think Lake Anna's fishing over the years? You've been there now a decent amount of time to see it just evolve.
The striper fishing was better when I first got here than it's been now. And I'm not sure why for sure. Nobody has any solid answers. They stock a ton of fish in here. I mean, I don't know how many tens of thousands. They stock the wipers and the stripers in here. They've been putting in the F1 bass, I think the last, 5 to 7 years or something like that.
Yeah, I think there's a year left on the stocking schedule.
Yeah.
And then, yeah.
And I can't tell the difference, but I guess they're supposed to be, getting up in that, 7, 8, 9, 10 pound class range here in the next couple of years or something like that.
We should start seeing 5 to 6 pounders this winter.
Okay.
I think. And then guys in that comment section, you can help me out with that if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, we should start seeing some bigger ones finally. Because like the 2 years ago when there was that big 30-pound bag, Odenkirk said like, yeah, that's all Northerns. That's not the F1s. They haven't shown up yet. And so they have a super fast growing cycle, but it's not you throw in a minnow and the next day it's 10 pounds. It's still gotta obey the laws of nature, but
Right.
I mean, Tyler Hypole said he saw on his scope 40 pounds and he ended up catching like 37, 38. Strykel had a good year or a tournament last winter and he caught like 30 plus
when
bag.
he caught that 31-pound bag. I was watching that. I says, "You're on one of my spots. What are you doing there?" Because actually, where he caught that 8-pounder, less than 50 yards from there is one of my better spots. I'm not going to say which direction, but I caught a 7-8 there in late June, like 50 yards where he caught that 8-pounder.
Wow.
Yeah, there's some huge bass where he did a lot of his fishing over the winter in the January tournaments. Yeah. There's some huge fish back in there.
That's wild. That's absolutely wild. When do you think winter starts? Is it a temperature that you're looking for?
I think the winter fishing season probably starts once we get the water steadily below 50 degrees. I think it's got to get the transit. I think we're finally going to get a transition now because we've been holding in the 70s for so long. There just hasn't been much of a change. It was warm and the water was up in the, upper 80s, low 90s, June and July. And we didn't get as hot as we did the previous year because we had so much rain and so much freshwater inflow, and it kind of kept things going pretty good. And then when August got here, the temperatures in August were like 4 to 5 degrees below normal for the month of August. September was below normal, but the water temperatures, it wasn't a severe, real sharp cold outbreak. It was too early in the year for that, but it stabilized the temperatures into the 70s. And we just saw things kind of hanging in the mid 70s. Now we're finally get water solidly into the 60s. So I think we're now probably going to start moving into the good transition season where, there could be some good days. It could be some bad days, but I think once we get the water down around 50 degrees and below, I think that's when we truly get into our winter season of fishing. And when the bass really start to school up quite a bit. I mean, I've only been here for 3.5 years fishing this lake. There's guys that have been here for 30 years fishing this lake. They know it like the back of their hand. There's so much knowledge down here.
What did you think of all the cold snap we got last winter? I feel like, again, just talking to old hunters and fishermen, so take it with a grain of salt, but they said it was like one of those 10-year El Nino crazy winters where the Susquehanna and the Upper Potomac freeze solid in certain areas and all this other stuff. Is this a one-off, or should we expect for the next couple of years wetter summers and colder winters?
That's a good question, and that's extremely difficult to answer. There's a lot of people that do focus on extended range forecasting, and we're talking 6, 7, 8 months out and everything else. It's really hard. It's a crapshoot when you're going out that far because most of your weather that you observe is what happens in my backyard. Did I get snow in my backyard? You live in the Hagerstown area. You look at that, and DC might be raining, you might be snowing, but it really depends on the weather patterns that set up in a particular time of year. So for our June, July, we'd set up and we had a massive trough to our west, and it just sat there, just parked there. And when that happens, we get a lot of tropical moisture in here, and we got, day after day after day after showers and thunderstorms. Now what's happened is, as we moved into August, that trough, instead of being to our west, was just to our east. We're on the back side of it. That's the dry side. In all the storms, and if you noticed, all the hurricanes, they're coming up the East Coast, and then they're turning away, and they just keep turning away. So that trough is kind of right on the East Coast now, and it's been turning everything away. So we're not getting any of the rains and stuff like that. When we get into winter, there's a pattern where we need to have that massive trough in the east actually very close to us so that we can get some of that moisture in, but at the same time hold the cold air in place, because it's really critical for these big winter storms for the middle Atlantic area, because we're so close to the Atlantic Ocean. It can be 70 degrees at Hatteras, and it can be 28 degrees in snowing 2 inches an hour in Hagerstown. And as a bird flies, that's probably only 400 miles or something, like maybe not even that far.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really critical. It's a very, very delicate setup for the big winter storms and the cold outbreaks for us. The Appalachian Mountains actually tend to insulate us a little bit from the cold air, because it's always much colder on the other side. You go back toward Pittsburgh and Cleveland and places like that, and it's always much colder there on the other side of the mountains, where here on the east side, we've got the effects from the Atlantic Ocean that tends to keep us a little bit warmer. And when these big systems actually do develop, the surface low track is extremely critical. It has to go right up for the DC area. It's got to go up somewhere between Richmond in Norfolk, Virginia, in order for there to be enough cold air to hold the snow in Northern Virginia. And like for the Lake Anna area, that low track needs to be even further south and east. Otherwise, it's rain here. I've seen many times where, DC will get 10 or 15 inches of snow, and down here at Lake Anna, it's raining the whole time, or Richmond's raining the whole time. It's a very, very sharp drop off to the south and east because of the warm air of the Atlantic Ocean.
It rained. It felt like every day from April through June-ish, and we were in flood conditions. You guys know, most of the tidal fisheries, rivers, whatever, really high water. And then the spigot just got shut off. And then people said we were in a drought. And it's very weird because for some people, it's like we literally had all of spring and half the summer was wet, and then it stopped raining, and then we're immediately in a drought. How does that all work with how they figure out, like, oh, we're in a drought versus we're not in a drought? Is it just that if you go 1 week without rain, it is considered a drought then? How does that all work?
You can look at long-term and short-term drought. And the long-term drought, they look at the depth of the moisture in the soils and how it's increasing or decreasing for the long-term drought. And usually around here in the middle Atlantic, long-term drought is not a big problem for us because we do have a great source of moisture with the Atlantic Ocean right there. We tend to get rain. So, and cap things off. Our big problems are short-term drought. So we were actually in pretty good shape. We were in very good shape coming out of July. August, it wasn't too bad. We had a little bit of rain, but the key why we didn't go into a pretty strong short-term drought in August were the temperatures were 4 to 5 degrees cooler. So we didn't get the evaporation, because normally we're still in the 90s in August, and we had so many days that were in the 70s and 80s. So our evaporation rates were a lot lower in August. So we didn't lose the soil moisture as quickly as we normally would do in the late summer drought. But now it's prolonged, and we're running, from a week to even moderate drought back up in the Blue Ridge and those areas. And it's going to take quite a bit of rain to get us out. I mean, we're probably running 4 or 5 inches below normal for the last 2.5 months. So there's an old slogan: when in a drought, leave it out. When you're stuck in a drought and you get in a drought, I think there's a lot of feedback because the soil moisture goes away, so you don't have the evaporation to help form clouds. So it's kind of a feedback signal where it kind of propagates itself. And a lot of times droughts ends in floods. You just get a big flood and it knocks everything out. Unfortunately, there's usually devastation with it. And that's what happened back in the Texas Hill Country last summer when all those campers died with the flash floods and everything. They were in severe drought. I don't know if you saw some of the lakes there. Some of those lakes were almost gone. They were just almost gone back in the Hill Country. They were, 40, 50, 60 feet below full pool. And after those floods, they filled back up again. They're all back up to a full pool now. But that happens quite a bit when you're in a prolonged drought. Pattern switches, and you end up getting a big deluge of rain, and you go from drought to flood really quick. It can happen.
Awesome stuff, guys. This is the absolute juice, honestly, when it comes to kind of just weather and how it all affects fish. Dude, we've covered so much stuff today. I really appreciate you coming on. Is there anything that we forgot to talk about?
Yeah, there's one thing. So, and I'm not making any money off of this, but there's a radar app. So a lot of people have your TV radar apps or whatever, or AccuWeather or something, or Weather Channel or something like that. But there's an app called Radar Scope. So the guy that owns the company I went to college with, super intelligent. So you can get it on Apple Play, or you can get it on Google Play or whatever. It's called Radar Scope. It's $9.99 for the base pattern. One-time charge is $9.99. The problem with that one is you only get the radar. If you do the $9.99 per year, you not only get radar, but you get lightning. And lightning is so important when you're out on the water. And you can set it up, and I can pull this up on my phone here. Hang on a second. You can set it up, and it will. So let's see here. It's a little bit difficult to see, but this is actually radar direct from the National Weather Service. That circle in the middle is my location right now. And you can turn that GPS signal on at any time or turn it off. And you can loop the radar. You can put up to 30 frames of radar in there, which is over an hour. And you can see where thunderstorms are moving or rain's moving or anything like that. And you can watch the lightning, and you can see where the lightning comes on, goes off, fades out, fades in. And if you're within 30 minutes of, if you see lightning, it's time to go. I saw that one video from, I'm not sure who it was. They were fishing on Lake Anna, and the lightning strike was just on the other side of the cove, or on the other side of the lake. I don't know if you showed it or not.
It was, I think it was, again, SB. I think he was fishing somewhere and the lightning strike. And if you check, you could see the lightning go through the water on his scope. That was actually showing on his console.
Yeah, it registered. Yeah, the changes in the water and how the lightning, I don't know if it warmed up the water or just the vibrations in the water showed. Just like if a boat goes by, and you can see all the changes on your side scan when a boat goes by. So the water got stirred up there. So I think that's what the live scope was actually seeing. But that first lightning stroke and the last one are usually the ones that get people, because the first one is they're fishing, nothing's been happening. All of a sudden there's one lightning stroke. I never heard anything before. Well, there's always got to be a first one with a thunderstorm. Okay. And then when it's moving out, there's always got to be a last one. So I like to use the 30-30 rule. So if you're out there and you see lightning, it's time to go. It's time to get under cover. And you want to, if you see the lightning or you hear the thunder and it's less than 30 seconds away. So sound travels about 800 feet per second. So it takes about 5 seconds for the thunder to travel about a mile. So 30 seconds, about 6 miles away, 5-6 miles away. And that's still pretty close. But if you hear thunder within 30 seconds or you see lightning, it's time to go. Go to shelter and wait it out. And wait till after the last bit of thunder you hear or you see the last lightning, wait another 30 minutes before you go back out again. Because there's always, they talk about, that the shot from the blue, the lightning from the blue, I've seen lightning actually come out of thunderstorms and land 15 or 20 miles away. And those single strokes like that at the end of a thunderstorm or the beginning of a thunderstorm are the most deadly, because people are not ready for it. They see the rain, they see the showers, things like that, but the lightning is what's going to get you. It really is. Anytime I always have my radar up, especially in the summertime when there's thunderstorm days. As soon as I see thunderstorms forming, like in Orange County or up on the Blue Ridge, and I time them out, and I see, well, I got an hour left, and I'm usually heading back. I'm not going to take a chance, because you can get pop-up stuff now and then and stuff like that. It's just not worth it. And you're the tallest thing out there, and you got a fishing rod in your hand, so it's just not the thing to do. But I would highly recommend the Radar Scope app. That's a really cool app. You can take it anywhere you go in the country. It'll work on every National Weather Service radar, travels with you. Again, $9.99 a year, no ads. You get
Wow.
0 ads.
With lightning, is it every situation, no matter what you're fishing, you should take heed of that? So example is, of course, in the middle of Lake Anna or Lake Erie, but what about a creek or a stream in the woods? Like, is it no matter what situation, you need to kind of just be aware of the lightning and get out?
You do. And I personally myself, I've gotten caught twice in a thunderstorm, once fishing and once hiking. Both times extremely scary. The one fishing, I was on Lake Frederick. My buddy and I were out there nighttime catfishing, and there were thunderstorms up north, and it didn't look like they were going to get down south, but they did. We couldn't get back to the boat dock. It came in too quick, and there was no radar scope app back then. And we just went to the back of the lake, and we pulled the boat up under a tree, got out of the boat, and just laid down under a bunch of clump of trees out of the water and out of the boat for like 30 or 40 minutes. And then once it was gone, then we motored on back, drowned rats. The other time I was hiking in Shenandoah. I do a lot of hiking up there, and thunderstorm blew up on top of the mountain, and I could not get down. I was near the top, and I just crawled under a tree, a low tree, as low as you can, crawled under there, laid flat, and just waited it out. That's all you can do. So that's the only thing to do, is get as low as possible under a small clump of trees. You don't want to stay away from the high ground if you can, and high trees.
Guys, as always, we're going to put a link into everything we talked about. The app. Your group. We got to talk about that too. You have a website, Facebook group.
Yeah. So when I retired down here, I found out that there's some weather information down here, but the TV stations in Charlottesville, DC, and Richmond, they care about Charlottesville, DC, and Richmond. Lake Anna is kind of a no man's land. And there wasn't a lot of focus for weather down here. There's weather information, but not a focus. So I just starting it as a hobby. I started a Lake Anna weather Facebook page, and that was in December of 2021, just before I moved down here. And now it's grown to over 7,000 members. It's a closed group, so it's not open to everyone. You have to ask to join. And I do that because I'm trying to keep it specifically weather. I just don't want people getting on there and throwing on things for sale and things like that. I do accept sponsorships, make a little fishing money on the side, because I do spend several hours a week, working the weather and everything. So I might as well go ahead and do that. So anybody wants to, advertise something, just get on there. You can ping me, and we can go over the details and stuff like that. But it's been extremely successful. In fact, so successful that this past year, my website, or the Facebook page, actually won the Best of Lake Anna category for Facebook.
Congratulations. That's awesome.
And also I got the Best of Lake Anna for humanitarian, just for the work I'm doing down here, providing people for weather information. So it's kind of a niche. It's people really needed it. They love it. And I'm having a lot of fun with it. Keeps me, busy between that and fishing, doing some bowling, and stuff like that. So.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah, guys, I'll put a link in the episode description to everything. Go check out his private Facebook group and, of course, website. And then I also will link the Radar Scope app as well. If people have questions about weather or anything like that, where can they reach you?
Well, if you join the Facebook group, you can go ahead and ping me right there. You can send me private messages, or just if you have a great question just so that you want to share with everyone, I'll go ahead and answer it right there.
Awesome. Guys, as always, and I'll just say it one last time, link in the episode description, everything we talked about. If you would just, please like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps me out in the algorithm. And if you could, please become a Patreon supporter. I'm in between jobs right now. And if it wasn't for the people on Patreon, I would be behind a dumpster at a Walmart somewhere right now. So you guys are really helping us keep the lights on here. I truly appreciate everything you guys do for me. And yeah, we will see you guys next time on Fishing the DMV. Bye. You're listening to Fishing the DMV with your host, Thomas Ahrens. Fishing the DMV is brought to you by Jake's Bait and Tackle, located in Winchester, Virginia.
If that doesn't get you jacked up, I don't know what will.